It's strange how you can live with someone for years, share a life, a home, and still wake up one day and realize you don't know them at all. It's even stranger when you realize you no longer recognize yourself either. This wasn't a story about infidelity or a sudden explosive fight. It wasn't about a dramatic betrayal or someone packing their bags. It was quieter, slower. A silent, creeping unraveling that neither of us noticed until it was too late. And now, as I sit here in the mess of it all, I can't help but feel the crushing weight of hindsight. The first sign, the first crack in our life together, came during the most mundane day. There was no big event, no fight, just one of those routine, late evenings when I came home from work. I noticed, not immediately, but soon after walking through the door, she was silent. Not angry, not upset, just silent, sitting on the couch, phone in hand, eyes scanning the screen. I could almost hear the silence in the room, its own weight pressing on me. This wasn't unusual at first. We'd both been tired. The days had been long, exhausting. But as I stood there, holding my coat in hand, something gnawed at me. I said her name. Olivia. No response. I cleared my throat and tried again. Olivia. She barely glanced up, just nodded. Hey. I tried, my voice careful. You okay? She didn't answer, not directly. She muttered, her eyes glued to her phone. I stood there for a while, unsure of how to fill the space between us. I thought maybe she just needed a moment. Maybe I was overthinking things. I walked into the kitchen, unpacking my lunch bag and trying to ignore the strange knot in my stomach. But something about it lingered. It was as if we were both playing roles, pretending that nothing was wrong when everything was. Later that night, after dinner, the silence didn't fade. We ate without speaking. I found myself watching her, trying to gauge her mood. What happened to the woman who used to tell me about her day over dinner, laugh at the stupid things I'd say, share her thoughts with me? Now, it was like I was eating with a stranger. The next few days weren't much different. She was there, but not really there. I started to wonder if it was me. Had I said something? Done something? Was I not paying enough attention? The questions didn't have answers, though. They just swirled in my mind, growing louder with each passing day. Then came the second shift, the subtle change in how she interacted with me. Or rather, how she didn't. She didn't touch me the same way anymore. No hand on my shoulder when I passed by. No kiss on the cheek when she said goodbye in the morning. No, I missed you when I returned home. These were the small things that used to make me feel seen, loved. But now, it was like I was just a roommate, someone who shared the same space, but didn't share the same life. I tried talking to her, of course. I'd sit down next to her, in the same way I used to when we'd share our little moments. Olivia, what's going on? I feel like we're fading. She'd respond, sometimes with a tight-lipped smile, sometimes with a shrug. I'm fine, she'd say, as if those two words were a shield she used to keep me from getting closer. I didn't believe her, though. You learn to recognize when someone is lying, even if it's just with their eyes. They don't meet yours. They don't hold the same warmth. I started to wonder, was this something she had been planning, or was I just too blind to notice the cracks earlier? And then one night, I walked in on her. Again, no fight, no big drama. She was sitting at her desk, typing away on her computer. I'd just returned from a late meeting, and she hadn't noticed me enter. I didn't want to disturb her, but something made me pause. She was laughing at something. Not at me, not at something I'd said, but at the screen in front of her, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in ages. The smile, the way her face lit up, something felt off about it. I couldn't help but feel that strange, unsettling pit in my stomach again. Who are you laughing with? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. She didn't immediately respond. She just clicked her mouse a few times, eyes still glued to the screen. Then, almost casually, she said, just a friend. A friend. I repeated, my voice a little sharper than I intended. She turned to me then, eyes briefly locking with mine. Yeah, a friend. I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to process what I was hearing. The conversation felt awkward, forced, but I let it go, at least for that moment. I told myself maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe she had every right to laugh with her friends, even if we weren't exactly close anymore. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Something had shifted. I wasn't even sure what it was, but I could feel the space between us growing. And every time she smiled at her phone like that, I felt more and more like I was just a shadow in her life. The weeks that followed didn't get any better. We fell into a routine. Me, coming home late from work. Her, immersed in whatever world she was retreating into. The distance between us was palpable. It wasn't the kind of distance you could talk through. It wasn't something you could fix with an apology or a gesture. It felt final, like we were both just waiting for the inevitable to happen, and yet, neither of us had the courage to admit it out loud. And so we carried on, pretending that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. But then, one night, things took a darker turn. The kind of turn I hadn't seen coming. It's strange how, when you're in the thick of something, it's almost impossible to see it clearly. But the minute you step away, you can see every detail. You can see how the patterns formed, how the little things added up to become something unrecognizable. By now, it wasn't just the silence that had grown between us. It was the strange absence of feeling. It was like living in the same house as a stranger, someone who simply existed in the same space but had no real connection to you. We were both physically there, but emotionally, not so much. I began to notice something else, something I hadn't really caught on to before. She was avoiding me. I'm not talking about the little things anymore. I'm talking about the fact that she started coming home late too, often, and the explanations became less frequent. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd respond with short answers. It was fine, just work stuff, and then retreat into whatever world she was inhabiting at the moment. It became routine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started staying up later at night, sitting in the dim light of our living room, trying to make sense of it all. I'd watch her as she wandered around the house, always glued to her phone, never fully present. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it. But then, the more I observed, the clearer it became. She was hiding something. It wasn't just that we weren't talking, it was that she wasn't here anymore. Her body might have been in the room, but her mind and heart were long gone. One evening, after we had barely exchanged a word all day, I decided to test the waters. I casually asked, "Who were you texting earlier? You've been on your phone a lot lately." She froze for a moment, her eyes flickering up to mine. There was a split second of hesitation, just enough for me to notice it, and then she quickly brushed it off, turning her attention back to the screen in her hand. "Oh, just a friend. Nothing important," she replied, her tone flat, like she was trying to make it sound like a non-issue. A friend. That word stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. I had asked her before about her friends, and always got the same answer. But something about the way she said it this time didn't sit right with me. I couldn't help but wonder if she was lying. But then again, maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe she was just busy with work, just stressed like everyone gets. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it festered. I started doing something I'd never done before. I began checking her phone when she wasn't around. At first, it was just a glance, just a simple check to see if my suspicions were grounded in anything real. But that one glance soon turned into a habit, and every time I looked, I found more. It wasn't blatant. It wasn't some smoking gun, but it was enough. Enough to make my stomach turn, enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The messages weren't exactly flirtatious, not overtly anyway, but there was a tone, an intimacy in the exchanges. Little jokes, a shared history that I didn't know about, comments about things I had never heard her mention. I tried to rationalize it, of course. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. One evening, after another long day, I came home and found her in the same spot, as usual, glued to her phone, eyes focused, her face lit by the screen. I don't know what changed in me at that moment, but something snapped. I couldn't pretend anymore. The frustration, the anger, the confusion, it all spilled out. I walked right up to her, almost feeling like I couldn't breathe, and asked, "Who is he, Olivia?" She looked up at me, her expression a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. For a moment, there was silence. She didn't answer right away, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to deflect the question, how to avoid giving me an answer. Finally, she put the phone down, sighing deeply. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice steady but with a hint of defensiveness. "I know about him," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "I know you've been texting him for weeks now. I've seen the messages." Her face froze for a moment, and I watched her swallow hard. The room felt suffocating, the tension thick between us. I could see her weighing her options, deciding whether to lie or tell the truth. She finally met my gaze, but her eyes were different, cold, almost empty. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. My heart sank. I'd heard those words before. I'd heard them from people who had done things they couldn't undo, who had crossed lines that should never be crossed. "I don't want to hear that anymore," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I need the truth, Olivia. Who is he?" She looked away, her eyes darting to the floor. For the first time in a long time, I saw fear in her eyes. But it wasn't fear of me. It was fear of something else, something bigger than our marriage, something she had been hiding for a while. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, barely audible. "But it's too late now. Too late." The words hit me like a brick. I didn't need her to finish. I already knew what she was saying. This wasn't some simple misunderstanding. It wasn't a fleeting moment of weakness. This was something deeper, something more profound. The silence between us stretched out, unbearable and final. "I'm sorry," she said, but it didn't feel like an apology. It felt like an escape. And that's when I understood. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry that I had found out. The truth didn't come out all at once. It wasn't some dramatic confession, but a slow unraveling. Each sentence Olivia said felt like a thread being pulled, exposing more and more of the lie she had been hiding. I sat there, in that dimly lit living room, my heart hammering in my chest. I was staring at her, waiting for an explanation, for something that would make sense of all the confusion I'd been living in for weeks. But all I got was silence. "Who is he, Olivia?" I asked again, my voice tight with frustration, but this time, there was something else in my tone. Something cold. Something I didn't recognize. It was the anger that had been building up for so long, finally surfacing. She looked at me, her face pale, her lips trembling slightly as she took a deep breath. It's not what you think." The words fell out, but they felt empty. There was no conviction in them, just a desperate attempt to put the mask back on, to make it seem like everything could go back to normal. I could feel the tears welling in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I refused to let her see me like that, weak and helpless. She had already taken enough. "You've been lying to me," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "You've been lying to me for who knows how long." "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never meant for it to get this far. It was just supposed to be harmless." "Harmless," I repeated, my mind racing. The lies, the distance, the secrets. Everything suddenly felt like it was falling into place, but it didn't make it any easier to understand. "What do you mean by harmless?" "You've been seeing someone behind my back." "That's not harmless, Olivia. That's a betrayal." Her face flushed, and she turned away, her hand trembling as she reached for her phone again. I felt the rage surge inside me. How could she even think that I'd let this slide? How could she sit there, acting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just broken something irreparable between us? "Who is he?" I demanded once more, my voice louder now, the frustration making me tremble. "Who have you been seeing behind my back?" She closed her eyes, as if she were trying to block out the weight of my words. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "His name is Ryan," she said, her voice barely audible. "We met a few months ago, just after we stopped being close. It wasn't planned. I didn't want it to happen." Ryan. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know who he was. I had never heard of him before. I tried to imagine who he could be, but all I could see was the betrayal. This wasn't some innocent fling. This wasn't something that could be explained away with some easy excuse. She had chosen him over me, over our life together, over everything we had built. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I say? What was there left to say? She had already admitted it. She had already crossed that line, and I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this? After everything? Didn't we mean anything to you?" She didn't answer at first. She just sat there, looking down at her hands, her face a mask of guilt and shame. I watched her, waiting for something. Anything. That would explain why she had done this, why she had thrown everything away. But all she did was shake her head. "I don't know," she said, her voice small and fragile. "I don't know why it happened. I felt alone. I didn't know who to turn to." "Alone," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You were never alone. We had each other. You chose to do this. You chose him over me, over us." "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered again. I just didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. That was the moment everything inside me cracked. The illusion that I could fix this, that I could somehow bring her back, vanished. She had made her choice. She had decided that the gap between us was too wide to bridge. And instead of reaching out for help, she had found someone else to fill the void. I stood up suddenly, the anger bubbling up inside me like an uncontrollable wave. "Don't you dare tell me you didn't mean to hurt me, Olivia," I shouted, the words raw and jagged. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we had. You took my trust and shattered it into a million pieces. And now you're sitting here, telling me it was all just an accident?" She flinched at my words, but she didn't try to stop me. She didn't argue. She just sat there, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She knew it was too late for apologies now. She knew there was no going back. "Please," she said softly, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "I never meant for it to get this far. I'm so sorry. Please, just understand." But I couldn't understand. Not anymore. I couldn't wrap my head around how someone who had once been my best friend, my partner, could betray me like this. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had turned into a stranger before my eyes. I turned away from her, walking toward the door. I needed to get out. I needed space. I couldn't breathe in the same room as her anymore, not with the weight of her lies hanging in the air. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this," I said quietly, my voice shaking. And with that, I walked out. The night I left, I didn't know what I was looking for. I walked aimlessly through the streets, my mind spinning, my heart heavy with the weight of the conversation I'd just had. Olivia's words echoed in my ears. Her apology, her explanations, all of them felt like hollow echoes bouncing off the walls of my brain. I kept trying to understand. I kept searching for something in her voice that would make me feel like there was hope, like there was some kind of redemption. But there was nothing. There was no relief. Just silence. I ended up at a bar, a dimly lit hole-in-the-wall place I hadn't been to in years. It wasn't the kind of place I usually went to, crowded, noisy, with too many people pretending to forget their own messes. But tonight, it was exactly what I needed. I slid into a booth in the back corner, away from everyone else, and ordered a drink. I stared at my reflection in the glass as the bartender poured the whiskey, not recognizing the man looking back at me. My eyes were tired, hollow. I was a shell of who I used to be, a man who had been in love, who had believed in the idea of marriage, of partnership, of trust. And now? Now I didn't know what I had left. I took a long swallow of the drink, the burn spreading down my throat, trying to numb the pain. But nothing helped. Nothing could. I had never felt so lost in my life. What was the worst part? Was it the betrayal itself? The knowledge that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had been with someone else, laughing and talking with him the way we used to? Or was it the emptiness? The fact that she no longer cared enough to try? I didn't know which was worse, but both felt like a heavy weight on my chest. I felt suffocated by the thought of her and Ryan, whoever he was, continuing their secret lives while I was left in the dark, in the wreckage of everything I thought we had. I tried to focus on something else, anything else. I picked up my phone, mindlessly scrolling through social media, but every post, every happy couple in the photos, every "we're so in love" caption made me want to throw the phone across the room. Everyone was pretending. Everyone was lying to themselves, just like I had been. I tried to force myself to stop thinking about her, but she was all I could think about. Hours passed, and by the time I left, the bar had emptied out. The night was quiet, cold, and the streets were almost deserted. I didn't know where to go, but somehow, I found myself walking back to our apartment. The apartment that no longer felt like home. I stood outside the building, staring up at the windows, wondering if she was still inside. Was she with Ryan now? Was she sitting in the same spot where I had sat just hours before, pretending everything was fine? I wanted to go back in. I wanted to confront her, to demand more answers. But something inside me stopped me. The man I had been before, the one who believed in fighting for what was his, was gone. That man no longer existed. I turned and walked away, not knowing where I was going, but not caring either. My life, my future, everything I had believed in, felt like it had been shattered. I didn't have answers, I didn't have closure, and I didn't even know what to do next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay. Not in that apartment. Not with her. For the next few days, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer any calls. I didn't know how to face the world after what had happened. Every time I tried to think about the future, all I could see was a blur of confusion and anger. I couldn't think past the hurt. I couldn't think past Olivia. Then, I received a message from her. At first, I didn't want to open it. I was angry. I was still reeling from everything. But curiosity won out. I opened it, hoping for some kind of clarity, some kind of explanation that could make sense of the mess she had left behind. The message was simple, just a few words. "Please, can we talk?" And that's when I realized. She wasn't done with me yet. She wasn't ready to let go. She was still clinging to the last thread of our relationship, even after everything she had done. I didn't know if I should be angry or relieved. But all I knew was that she was asking for something I didn't know if I could give her anymore. For the first time in days, I felt something stir inside me. Not hope, not longing, but something else, something darker. Something that told me I needed to face this, that I couldn't keep running. But what would happen if I did? What if I let her back in? What if I forgave her? Could I live with myself after that? Could I forgive her? I stood there, staring at the message, my mind racing. I knew I had a choice to make. A choice between confronting her and trying to salvage whatever was left of our marriage, or walking away for good. But that's when I realized something else. It wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about making things right. It was about me. It was about figuring out who I was without her, without the life we had built together. And that terrified me more than anything else. I took a deep breath, locking the phone screen, and turned around. I wasn't ready for any more of her explanations, not yet. I needed to figure out who I was before I could even think about what I wanted from her. But that night, as I lay in bed, the silence was deafening. The only thing I could hear was my own thoughts. Thoughts about Olivia, about the choices I had to make, and about the life I was now facing alone. The days bled into each other, an endless blur of uncertainty. Each morning I woke up, half expecting some kind of miracle, some sudden shift in the universe that would bring me back to the life I once knew. But nothing changed. I still couldn't bring myself to respond to Olivia's messages. It wasn't because I didn't want to hear her side. It was because I wasn't sure I could survive hearing it. I stayed in that temporary apartment for a week. A small, sterile place, just enough for me to get by. I didn't unpack. I didn't even bother to make the bed. I just existed, one day blending into the next. Every morning I woke up with the same sick feeling in my stomach, the same overwhelming emptiness in my chest. Every evening I returned to the same lonely space, the silence suffocating me. The reality of what had happened was starting to set in, and with it came an anger that had been slowly simmering beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the images of Olivia, the woman I had shared my life with, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, laughing and smiling with Ryan. I had always believed that trust was the foundation of any relationship, but now I had to question everything. What was real? What had been real? I thought back to every small moment, the subtle shifts, the fleeting glances, the half-hearted gestures. I realized she had been pulling away for months, if not longer. But I had refused to see it. It wasn't just that she had cheated. It was that she had prepared herself for it long before I even noticed. She had taken herself out of our relationship, piece by piece, and I had failed to see the slow dismantling of our marriage. There had been no one explosive moment, no clear "this is where it all went wrong." Instead, it was a quiet erosion, small choices made, one after the other, until there was nothing left but the shell of what we had once had. But even knowing that didn't make it easier to accept. I was left standing at the crossroads of my own life, a man divided between the need to move on and the undeniable pull of a past that still felt like it was haunting me. The phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, dragging me out of my thoughts. It was Olivia again. Her name flashed across the screen, and for a brief moment, I considered ignoring it. I had done that for days now, not answering her calls, leaving her messages unread. But something stopped me. Something deep inside urged me to take a step forward, to face what had been haunting me. So I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before I unlocked it. The message was simple, but the words hit me harder than I expected. "I need to see you. Please. It's important." I stared at the message, the reality of it sinking in. She was asking for another chance, another conversation, one that I knew would either tear us apart completely or somehow put the final nail in the coffin of what we had. I didn't know if I was ready for that, but I also knew I couldn't keep running forever. I typed out a quick response, more out of instinct than anything else. Fine, let's talk. Within the hour, I found myself standing outside our old apartment building. The familiar sight of it made my stomach churn. This was where we had built our life together, where we had laughed, cried, and dreamed about the future. And now? Now it felt like a ghost of the past, a place I no longer recognized. The door to the apartment opened slowly, and there she was. Olivia. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She looked different, not just physically, but emotionally, broken, almost. It made my chest tighten, but I didn't let it show. "You came," she whispered, almost as if she hadn't expected me to show up. "I came," I said flatly, trying to sound as indifferent as I felt. I wasn't sure what I was expecting from this conversation, but I had to be prepared for whatever she was about to throw at me. She stepped aside to let me in, her movements slow and hesitant. It felt like the air in the room was thick, suffocating. I could barely breathe, let alone think clearly. I had no idea where to start. What could I possibly say to her after everything? What could she possibly say to me that would make any of this okay? "I know you're angry," she started, her voice shaking. "And I understand why. But I need you to know, I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly, the sound escaping before I could stop myself. "Really? You didn't mean to hurt me? You don't think you might have hurt me when you decided to sleep with someone else behind my back? You don't think you might have hurt me when you started lying to my face, telling me everything was fine while you were seeing him?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the person I used to love. But the truth had already been laid bare, and no amount of tears or apologies would change that. "I was lost," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I felt so alone. And Ryan, he listened. He made me feel like I mattered again. I was so desperate for something, anything, to make me feel alive again. But I never stopped loving you, even when I made those mistakes." The words hit me like a slap in the face. She was still trying to justify it, still trying to make herself the victim. But she wasn't the victim here. I was. I had loved her with everything I had, and she had thrown it all away for someone else. "I don't know what you want me to say, Olivia," I replied, my voice low and steady, though I could feel the anger rising again. "I don't know what you want from me. You've already made your choice. You've already broken everything we had. I'm not some guy you can just come back to when it gets hard. You don't get to hurt me like this and expect me to just forgive you." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her reasons. It was too late for that. "I'm done," I said quietly but firmly. "I can't do this anymore." Olivia took a step toward me, reaching out like she was trying to hold on to the last thread of what we had. But I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, it's over, Olivia. It has to be." I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the woman who had once been my everything. The apartment, the life we had built together, was no longer mine to save. It was time to move on, no matter how hard it was. As I stepped out into the cold night, I felt the weight of the decision sink in. The hardest part wasn't walking away. It was accepting that I could never go back, that the life I had once dreamed of with her was gone, and there was nothing left but the pieces of a broken past. And yet, even as I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder, was it really over? Or was I just too afraid to face the truth of what I had to do next? I didn't expect it to hit me like this. After everything, the betrayal, the anger, the walking away from her in the middle of a heart-wrenching conversation, I thought I would feel relief. I thought I would walk out that door and never look back. But as the days passed, I realized something. The weight of what had happened wasn't lifting. If anything, it was only getting heavier. Each passing moment felt like a countdown to something I couldn't quite understand. I spent the next few days trying to fill the emptiness inside me. I went back to work, to my usual routine, but it felt like I was walking through life in a fog. Every corner of my apartment felt foreign, like I was inhabiting someone else's space. The quiet, the stillness, it was maddening. There was no one there to fill the silence. No Olivia, no familiar presence. I had always thought that I could handle being alone, but this was different. The loneliness didn't feel like the freedom I had imagined. It felt suffocating, but I couldn't let myself think about it for too long. If I did, the floodgates would open. I wasn't ready to face what had happened. Not yet. So instead, I threw myself into work, into meaningless distractions, doing anything I could to avoid the gnawing feeling of loss that lingered beneath the surface. It wasn't until I found myself walking past a cafe we used to visit that it hit me all over again. The realization that we would never share those small, simple moments together again. I paused outside the window, watching couples inside, sipping their drinks, talking to each other like everything in the world was okay. I envied them. They hadn't experienced what I had. They hadn't had their world shattered by someone they loved. I could almost hear Olivia's voice in my head, asking if I would ever forgive her, asking for another chance. The question haunted me, even though I had already made my decision. But even with all the time that had passed, I hadn't fully come to terms with the choice I had made. Part of me wanted to go back. Part of me wanted to walk back into that apartment, to pull her into my arms and tell her that everything could be fixed. But I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. She had chosen someone else. She had chosen him. And no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of a relationship that was already broken. That afternoon, I decided I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep lying to myself that everything was fine. So I called her. When Olivia picked up, her voice was tentative, unsure. Hello. I took a deep breath, fighting the rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. We need to talk, I said quietly, trying to sound calm, though my heart was racing. She hesitated. I could hear the shakiness in her breath. What about? The truth, I said. The real truth. Not the excuses. Not the apologies. I need to know if you really meant what you said, if you understand what you did. She sighed heavily. I could almost hear her weighing her words, trying to figure out what to say next. But after a long pause, she spoke again, this time more softly. I'm sorry, more than you'll ever know. But I also know I can't fix this. Not right now, maybe not ever. Her words hit me harder than I thought they would. It wasn't the apology I was looking for, but it was something else, an acknowledgement that she understood the gravity of what she had done. There was no easy way to fix this. No magic words that would make everything right. I'm not asking you to fix it, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I just need to know you understand, that you get how much you hurt me. I do, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand, but I also know that understanding isn't enough. I can't undo what I've done. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. The silence between us stretched on, each word hanging in the air, heavy and unresolved. I wanted to say something, anything, that would give me closure, that would help me feel like this nightmare was over. But there was nothing. There was no closure. There was no neat, tidy ending to this chapter. After a moment, I spoke again. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Olivia. I don't know if I want to. But I do know this. I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to move on. And I need you to do the same. I understand, she whispered, and I could feel the tears in her voice. We hung up without another word. Both of us left with nothing but the raw truth of what had happened. There was no resolution, no promise of reconciliation, just a decision to move forward, even if we didn't know what that would look like. For the next few days, I tried to live with the decision I had made. I moved on with my life, but the pain was still there, gnawing at me. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't outrun the memories of the good times, of the life I thought we had. But the reality was simple. The past was gone. She was gone. And there was nothing left for me but to rebuild. But the hardest part? The hardest part wasn't letting go of Olivia. It was letting go of the life I thought I would have. The future we were supposed to build together. The family we would never have. Those dreams were gone, lost in the wake of everything that had happened. And now, I had to figure out who I was, what my life was supposed to be without her. That was the real reckoning. And I didn't know if I was ready to face it. But I had no choice. Because the truth, as painful as it was that I had already lost her. And now, I had to figure out how to live without her. And somehow, someway, I had to find a way to heal, even if I didn't know where to start. It's strange how quickly a life can change. One minute you're standing on solid ground. The next, the earth is pulled from beneath you, and you're left falling. There's no real way to prepare for the impact. You think you know how strong you are, how resilient. But until it happens, until your whole world is torn apart in an instant, you have no idea what kind of person you'll become. In the days that followed my conversation with Olivia, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in a long time. I reflected. Not just on the heartbreak or the betrayal, but on the entire relationship. The love, the promises, the moments of pure joy. And, yes, the small cracks I had ignored for far too long. I realized I had been so focused on what we had lost, on what she had taken away, that I hadn't taken a step back to understand the bigger picture. I wasn't just grieving the woman I had loved. I was grieving the illusion of her, the idea of her that I had built in my mind. The person I had trusted with my deepest thoughts, my dreams, my future. But the truth was, that person had never really existed. She had been slipping away for a while. I had just been too blind to see it. I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, though I found it harder and harder to focus. I began picking up hobbies I had abandoned, playing guitar again, something I hadn't done in years. I went for long runs in the mornings, sometimes along the beach, trying to outrun the fog of doubt and sorrow that seemed to cloud every part of me. But no matter how many miles I ran or how many chords I strummed, the truth kept catching up with me. I couldn't outrun it. I knew that I couldn't keep pretending I was fine. Something inside me had cracked, and it wasn't going to be fixed with a few changes in routine. I had to face it. I had to face her. The last time I saw Olivia was the night I walked out of our apartment. The last time I allowed myself to believe that we could ever go back. Since then, there had been no closure, no finality. Just silence. But one evening, almost a month after that phone call, I got a message. "Can we talk? Please. I need to see you." It hit me harder than I expected. My heart raced. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar pull, the one that had once kept me tethered to her. The urge to fix everything, to heal the broken pieces, was so strong that I almost gave in. But I knew better now. I stared at the message for what felt like forever, letting the words sink in. "Please. I need to see you." She needed to see me. For what? Was she going to apologize again? Was she going to ask me for something I wasn't sure I could give her anymore? I had no idea, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living like this. The silence between us had lasted too long. I agreed. I told her to meet me at the same cafe we used to go to when things were good between us. The place had once been a refuge, a place where we could talk for hours, lose track of time, and forget the world outside. Now, it felt like a battlefield. The night I showed up, the air felt different. The cafe was nearly empty, the quiet hum of ambient music filling the space. I sat at a corner table, my fingers tapping nervously on the surface. My thoughts raced, questions flooding my mind. What was I expecting from this? What was she expecting? I didn't have to wait long. Olivia walked in, looking the same, but different. There was a hollow sadness in her eyes, something that wasn't there before. She had always been the kind of person who radiated warmth, who made everyone around her feel like they mattered. But now, she looked like a shadow of the woman I once knew. She spotted me, her eyes locking onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like we were back in time. Like nothing had changed. But I knew better. I had seen too much, felt too much, to pretend everything was the same. She approached the table slowly, hesitating for a moment before sitting down. Neither of us spoke at first. We just sat there, the weight of everything hanging between us. I couldn't tell if it was the anticipation of what was to come or the raw emotion that still lingered between us. But the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, almost broken. "I'm sorry. For everything. I never meant to hurt you. Not the way I did." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I don't think you fully understand what you've done, Olivia," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "You don't just betray someone once and expect them to forget it. You shattered everything. You destroyed our trust, and I don't know if I'll ever get that back." She flinched, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I know. And I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could go back and fix everything, but I can't. I can't undo the hurt I caused. All I can do is apologize and hope that one day, you can forgive me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hear her words and feel the weight of them, to feel like they meant something. But the truth was, forgiveness wasn't something I could just hand out. Not anymore. Not after everything. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Olivia," I said, the words tasting bitter. "And I don't know if I want to. But I can't keep pretending like this didn't happen. I can't keep pretending like you didn't break me. And I can't keep waiting for you to fix what you've broken." She nodded, her face pale, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A glimpse of the woman who had been lost, the woman who had abandoned everything in search of something she couldn't even define. I understand, she said, her voice small. I know that, and I don't expect you to fix me. But I need you to know that I regret everything. I'm sorry for the hurt I caused. And if you can't forgive me, I'll live with that. But I had to see you one last time. I had to hear you say it. Because I've been living with this guilt for far too long. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Neither of us knew what to say next. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out and never look back. But something about this moment, about seeing her again, made me realize that no matter how much I tried to move on, the past wasn't ready to let me go. I can't promise anything, I said finally, my voice low. But I need time. I need space to figure out what I'm supposed to do next. I can't make any decisions right now. She nodded slowly, wiping away a tear. I understand. And I'm sorry. For a long moment, we just sat there, the weight of our history pressing down on both of us. I could see that she was fighting to hold it together, but I also saw the truth in her eyes. She knew it was over. And I knew it too. When I stood up to leave, she didn't try to stop me. She just looked at me, one last time, with a mixture of regret and sadness. And that was it. We walked away from each other. No promises, no resolutions. Just the heavy silence that had defined us for so long. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. It was over. We were over. And I didn't know where to go from here. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep holding on to a past that wasn't mine anymore. I had to let go. I had to move on. Even if I didn't know how. In the days that followed, the weight on my shoulders began to ease, but it wasn't immediate. Healing never is. It wasn't some dramatic turning point where everything just clicked. It was more like a gradual realization that I had the power to rebuild, to reclaim the parts of me I had forgotten about. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel: hope. It wasn't about forgiving Olivia or about erasing what happened. It was about choosing to move forward, despite everything. I spent time doing the things that used to bring me joy, things I hadn't made space for in a long time. I started cooking again, something I had always loved but had neglected during the past few months. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed creating something from scratch. It was simple, yes, but it gave me a sense of accomplishment, of control over something in my life. I even started picking up books I had left unread on my shelf, reconnecting with the parts of me that had been buried by the distractions and the hurt. I met friends I hadn't seen in months, re-establishing connections that had faded over time. We went out to eat, laughed about silly things, and shared stories about our lives. It wasn't about forgetting Olivia or pretending like everything was fine, but it was about allowing myself to remember what it felt like to be whole. Slowly, I began to see that I wasn't defined by the heartbreak. That chapter wasn't the end of my story, it was just a chapter. There were days when the grief would hit, when the memory of what we'd lost would come rushing back. And on those days, I allowed myself to feel it. But I didn't let it control me anymore. I had learned something important. Pain, while inevitable, doesn't have to define you. It's just a part of the journey. Then, one afternoon, I was sitting at the cafe where Olivia and I had last met, sipping coffee and watching people go by. The place, once filled with so much emotional weight, now felt light. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to consume me. I smiled to myself, realizing that this was a moment of growth. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was embracing it, accepting it for what it was, and moving on. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I looked up to see someone across the room. A woman, smiling softly at me. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I felt a connection, a quiet acknowledgement that, yes, there was life beyond the pain. She walked over, introducing herself, and we struck up a conversation. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. Just two people talking like old friends catching up. It felt simple, and that simplicity was exactly what I needed. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't broken. I wasn't incomplete. I had been given a second chance, not at a life with Olivia, but at a life of my own, a life that I was in control of. We didn't talk about anything profound. We talked about our favorite books, our travels, what made us laugh. But it was real. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be okay. I was okay. Better than okay, in fact. A few months later, I found myself standing on a new path. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when the past tried to creep in, but each time, I reminded myself that I had learned to navigate it. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, but it also had a way of showing you what was meant for you. The future wasn't set in stone, but it was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. Ready for what came next. Ready to let go of the past and embrace whatever lay ahead. Maybe it was love again. Maybe it wasn't. But either way, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer defined by my mistakes or by the betrayal. I was defined by my strength, by the lessons I had learned, and by the choices I made every single day. And as I walked into the future, I finally realized that it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something new, something I could write for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the possibilities.